Okay, so for this topic, we will be talking about the urinary system. Okay, when we talk about the urinary system, what are the main types of tissue that can be found within the organs comprising the urinary system? Of course, when we say urinary system, the first organ that comes into mind would be your kidney, right? As well as the tubes that would connect your kidney to your urinary bladder as well. And then the urethra, that's the ureter. And of course, from the urinary bladder to the outside environment, we would need the urethra as well. So all of these organs or subpart of your urinary system would have your, of course, the epithelial tissue. And as we all know, the kidney is actually made up of nephrons, right? And what are nephrons? Nephrons are actually really small tubules, unit of tubules that are convoluted or twisted or folded to one another that has been clumped together in a very compact manner. Anyway, since they are tubules or tubes, they have a lumen technically. And whenever there is a space within the body or within organs, this type of tissue will be the one lining it. Diba? And of course, we will have your connective tissue which forms the stroma or the supporting framework of tissue. And then, of course, we would have your muscle tissue, which also supports the organs that are a part of your urinary system, as well as they also help in the expulsion or flow of the urine. Okay, so we will talk about the kidney, the urinary bladder, as well as the ureter. And then for the urethra, actually, we will just talk about it shortly because it will be described more in detail when we discuss the reproductive system. Okay? So for the basic structure of the urinary system, organ-wise, no, some parts of it, especially the kidney, would be parenchymatous, while some parts of it would be tubular, di ba? So for the kidney, even though it's made up of nephrons, which are technically tubules and which has a lumen, grossly, still, the kidney looks like a very solid organ. But for the urinary bladder, as well as the ureter and the urethra, they are actually tubular in nature because they would contain a big um, opening in the middle, which is the lumen. So, what are the main functions of the urinary system? Of course, first is waste elimination, no? And previously, when we were talking about the glands, we also discussed a very vital organ, your liver, which also, aside from creating digestive juices, also primarily functions to eliminate waste out of the blood, right? The kidney is another organ, which functions to remove wastes out of the blood. Okay, that's why during examination of tissue sections from a necropsy case, the kidney, together with your liver, are one of the most vital organs that are almost always included because it will give the histopathologist or the veterinarian an idea of the type of insult or if the animal was actually sick or not. Okay? What else? It also uh, functions to maintain the electrolyte and fluid balance of the body. Okay? So what are electrolytes again? So they're actually your molecules which are charged, no? And this type of molecules is important because they allow the proper functioning of the other systems, no? Especially the propagation of action potentials in the nervous system, in the neurons, as well as in the contraction of muscle fibers. Okay? So again, maintenance of these electrolytes are very important. What else? Since the fluid balance or the water content is being regulated by the urinary system, the blood pressure is also one of the things that is being controlled by the urinary system. No, because um, in the blood there is a liquid component, right? The plasma. So the amount of water that goes into the plasma or goes out of the plasma can actually dictate blood pressure or blood flow. What else? Some cells of the kidneys can actually produce hormones, which can also regulate the contraction of the smooth muscle cells, which are located in the walls of your blood vessels, diba? So this also describes the endocrine role of the kidney. Okay? And in general, your kidneys in domestic species would have different shapes, no? The more common one is the unilobar type, and then you will see here that there's actually a cortical and medullary part, no? As with your other organs, no? And then some animals would have grouped portions of your cortex and medulla, so it would look like this, and this will be called your lobes or multilobar kidney. Okay, so a medulla portion or component is present in every lobe as well as a cortical portion. While some animals will be the in between of these two types, no, you would see that there are um, group medullary parts, but the cortex is still fused, no? So this is for your pigs, and this is for your large ruminants, and this is usually for your smaller domestic animals such as your cat and your dog, and as well as the humans, no? What else can we see? um Here is the renal pelvis, right? And then if the kidney has multiple lobes, it would have to, of course, subdivide itself into structures called your calyces or calyx if it's singular. Okay, so how do the kidneys develop? Well, basically the kidneys come from which germ layers? The mesoderm as well as your endoderm, no? So actually from the somatic mesoderm, the nephron or the uriniferous tubules actually comes from your somite, while the blood vessel portion of your nephron or your kidney comes from the aorta. And then the lining of the urinary bladder as well as your ureters and urethra would actually come from your endoderm. Okay? So here you will see that it's the kidney is actually made up of a vascular as well as, so in the form of blood vessels, as well as uriniferous tubule. Okay? And we can just see here that both components, the vascular part, the one that is delivering the blood to be filtered, and the one that is actually doing the filtration is closely intertwined. It just becomes more complicated and convoluted and folded over and over again as the kidney or the organ develops. No, so again, um, the body is using foldings or convolutions in order to maximize whatever limited space there is for the organ or the body. Okay, to increase the surface area for filtration, as well as absorption of nutrients, as well as elimination of waste products. Okay, so here we can just see that apparently in the embryo, the primitive version of your kidney actually reaches up to the cranial area, no, up to here. And then actually there are three versions of your primitive kidney, and then they have different names, no? You would have your pronephros, your mesonephros, and your metanephros. And then in the embryo, actually, the pronephros is the first part of the primitive kidney, and then it will eventually regress to be replaced by the mesonephros. And then for higher order animals, this mesonephros will still be replaced by your metanephros. Okay, so these are like sequential development and parts of the primitive kidney. Okay, and depending on the species, as what I have said earlier, some species will actually maintain their mesonephros, and their mesonephros will be the ones who will do the filtration of their blood even up into the adult life. Okay, so this would be for your fishes and amphibians. While for the higher order animals, such as humans and most of the domestic species of animals, it would be the metanephros, which would finally um, take the form of your adult kidney. Okay, so here we can see that the pronephros is the first part that will develop, and then it will regress, and then finally you would have your mesonephros, which will be the primary organ having the functions of the kidney during the embryonic life, bulk of the embryonic life, and then finally, when the animal is born, it will have a more developed metanephros. So this figure shows the development of the kidney, no, from a small bud to more bigger and final organ. Okay. So here you can see that the renal pelvis actually branches out into calyces, no? If the kidney needs it, or if the species would have lobes. Okay. So here is another photo of a mouse embryo. So actually, I got this from a paper, and here you can see that they have stained the ureter part. So here you can see the part of the mesonephros. And here you would see the renal pelvises and the calyces. And this part will actually give rise to the kidney. Okay, adult kidney. Okay, and here it seems like they are showing that this specific gene, when it is deleted, the kidney cannot truly develop. Okay, so here, so in the older embryos, you can see that the mesonephros is actually made up of a lot of tubules. Okay, so the mesonephros is quite extensive, and in this section, the metanephros is not yet evident, and the pronephros is already gone. Okay, so what are the parts of the urinary system? Of course, we would have our kidney, the ureter, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. For the kidney, you would have your cortex and your medulla, and then your cortex can have subparts, the part that contains the convoluted tubules, and then the part that contains the radially organized parts of the collecting duct, as well as the straight parts of your tubule. Okay, and then the medulla, which can have an outer zone and inner zone. Okay, so outer zone will be near your cortex, while the inner zone will be near your renal pelvis. Okay, then from the renal pelvis, we will go to the ureter, which is lined by your transitional epithelium. So from the parenchymatous part of the urinary system, we would have the tubular part now until the end into the urethra. So the ureter, the urinary bladder, as well as the urethra will have the four basic tunics or tunica layers as with your digestive system, no? But this time, instead of a simple cuboidal epithelium, or columnar epithelium, or a stratified squamous epithelium, in the urinary system, the lining epithelium should be able to adjust depending on whether the organ is full of urine or not. So it should be able to stretch or contract. That's why it needs your transitional epithelium. And if you will remember our topic about the types of lining epithelium, this transitional epithelium can change shape. It can look like simple cuboidal to simple squamous. No, simple squamous or flattened cells if the organ is filled with urine, and simple cuboidal if it is contracted. Okay, so later we're gonna see more of that. And then the ureter would have your next deeper layers, which would be your lamina propria submucosa, and then the tunica muscularis. So the lamina propria and submucosa is usually combined because it lacks which layer? It lacks the muscularis mucosae or lamina muscularis. But in some instances, especially in the urinary bladder, if the animal is bigger, it would need an additional support or layer. So the lamina propria may be separated from the submucosa by um, a thin muscle layer. So again, that's your muscularis mucosae. Okay. For the tunica muscularis of the ureter, we have these layers, no? Inner longitudinal and the outer circular. So what can we see here is actually the opposite of what is seen in the digestive system, right? Because in the digestive system, it's usually the inner circular and outer longitudinal. So why the change in the positioning or orientation of smooth muscle fibers? So this is because in the digestive system, um, the flow or the contraction of muscles is usually rhythmic, right? Peristaltic movement. Because the flow of ingesta through the GIT is not continuous, right? It's rhythmic. While usually in the ureter, in the urinary bladder, when the urine needs to be expelled, it's usually a continuous motion, no? So this accounts for the longitudinal arrangement of layers in the inner part and the circular arrangement in the outer part. And for some animals again, which are bigger and would have bigger and thicker ureters, you would have an additional outer longitudinal layer again. Okay? And lastly, you would have your tunica adventitia or serosa depending on where the organ is. Okay? Again, if that part of the organ is still embedded within the extremities, then you would have your adventitia. But if the organ wall is not opposed to any parenchymatous organ or is in a body cavity, then it would be your serosa. Okay? So these layers is actually the same with your urinary bladder. But the urinary bladder, it is more common to have a separate lamina propria than your submucosa. And the tunica muscularis, this time, does not have any distinct layers, no? So there's just like an irregular um, organization of smooth muscle fibers, okay? And then finally, there's your tunica serosa. And for the urethra, it will be described more when we discuss the reproductive system. But in general, again, it also has your transitional epithelium, your tunica muscularis. The transitional epithelium is stratified cuboidal or simple columnar or stratified columnar depending on which segment of the urethra. No, but the part of the urethra that is still very near to the urinary bladder, it's still transitional epithelium. But as the urethra goes to the more outside environment, it can transition to a stratified cuboidal to simple columnar to stratified columnar depending on the animal actually, no? And then finally for the tunica muscularis, it can have the same arrangement of muscle fibers. Also, for the urethra, in the avian species, actually, it doesn't have a transitional epithelium at all because the avian species does not have a urinary bladder. So it's usually just stratified columnar or pseudostratified columnar for them. So later, let's see the actual tissue, no? And again, let's go back to the tunica muscularis part. Still the same, no? Longitudinal, circular, and then longitudinal. Okay, so for the kidneys, here we can see that here is the cortex, and then the medulla, and then the renal pelvis, okay? And the space between the renal pelvis and the inner medullary zone is your renal crest, okay? So here you can see there's a hilus, and that is where your blood vessels will go inside, no? Kasi again, we must not forget that in order for the kidney to do its filtration function, it needs something that it will filter. So that would be your blood. Okay? So this will be the blood entry. And then after filtration in the tubules, the urine will contain the wastes and it will go out into the ureter and finally into the urethra and out of the body. Okay, so again, a review of the different types of shapes of kidneys that is usually found in the animals. Okay, even if they are grouped differently, they are lobulated or not, in general, the histological components found in the cortex and the medulla will be the same. Okay, so here you can see that the nephron is actually divided into the uriniferous part and the vascular part. Again, the vascular part is the part which carries the blood. After it carries the blood, the uriniferous tubule system will actually take out, will filter it and take out the good things, the nutrients, and absorb it back into the body. And then all the bad things, it will just expel out into the um, ureter and then into the urinary bladder and then into the urethra. Okay? And then you will see here for the parts. So, of course, this is the glomerulus. And then if you, another term for it, more general term for it would be your renal corpuscle, no? So this will be your renal corpuscle, and it's made up of your glomerulus, which is actually a tuft or a bunch of capillaries. And before we discuss this in our cardiovascular system, your capillaries actually has multiple versions or types, right? And the one that is found in the nephron would be your fenestrated type of capillaries, no? So they are fenestrated because they should be able to release the filtrate material, okay? So it's in here. And then after the filtrate material, it will be put into the glomerulus area here, and then it will flow into the proximal convoluted tubule. So proximal meaning it is in relation with the vascular area. Okay, so actually the glomerulus or the renal corpuscle has poles, no? The vascular pole, the one that is directly connected to the blood supply, and then the urinary pole, the one that is connected to the uriniferous tubule. Okay. Anyway, so proximal, then convoluted or folded part, and then straight part, descending, thick segment, and then descending, thin segment, ascending, thin segment, ascending thick segment, and then it will convolute again, and this time it is found farther away from the vascular area. That's why it's called your distal convoluted tubule. And then finally it will go to the collecting duct and into the pelvis and into the ureter. Okay, so you can see here that some parts of the nephron are found in the medulla part, and some parts, the straighter parts, are found in the, some parts, the more convoluted and the corpuscles are found in the cortical part, while the straight parts, thick as well as thin, are found in the medullary part. Okay? Here, another more in-depth discussion. Again, you would have your glomerulus. So your glomerulus actually is the tuft or clump of fenestrated capillaries. So blood would actually go here, and then the glomerulus will take the filtrate, and then after the blood is filtered, it will go back into the circulation. No? And then the filtrate, it contains both the good and the bad things. The good things will be reabsorbed by the tubules and the bad things will be expelled out. Okay? So for the glomerulus, it's the actual capsule which surrounds, for the glomerular capsule or the Bowman's capsule, rather, it's the one that actually covers the glomerulus, no? And you can see here that it has two layers, no? the parietal layer, and the visceral layer. And then in between them, that would be the urinary space. Okay? So it's the one that primarily takes the filtrate. And then it will go to the proximal convoluted tubule where a lot of nutrients are absorbed and as well as water and other stuff. Okay? And then it will go down, and as it goes down, some areas will be not much for reabsorption of nutrients, but just for water. Okay, so it depends, no? But the main function is that only the waste will eventually go out. Okay, or majority would be waste, and the things that are still needed by the body would be reabsorbed back into the capillary system. So as you can see here, the vascular part as well as the uriniferous or urine conducting tubule part are intimately intertwined. That's why when we examine the kidney, it will be very common to see a lot of blood vessels side by side with your uriniferous tubules. Okay? So again, another detailed diagram of the different parts of your uriniferous tubule. Okay, so here we can see that this is the cortex, and as we said earlier, some areas would contain this part, the glomerulus, and the convoluted tubules, which will register as circles or holes. So this will be your pars convoluta here as well, while some parts would register the straight parts, this one, the collecting duct, as well as the initial parts of your thick part of your descending and ascending. So it will be this part. Okay. Zoomed in, again, convoluta and radiata. And this would be your corpuscles, and you can see we can appreciate the glomerular capsule, which has two layers, the parietal and the visceral, and the urinary space in between them. Okay, and here is a zoomed in part which accounts for this area. So you can see there's a thin area and thick area. Thinner areas would have, of course, thinner walls. Okay, while thicker areas would have more thicker walls. Okay, so the usual choice of lining epithelium for this part would be either squamous or cuboidal. Squamous for the thinner limbs and or thinner portions, and cuboidal for the more thicker portions. Okay? So let's try to focus more into the glomerulus. Okay? So this area. So the glomerulus has a lot of parts, no? Because this is the part where the vascular and the urinary portions actually come into contact, no? So a lot of controlling mechanisms or cells are actually in here as well. Again, as what we said earlier, the glomerular area has a vascular pole where the vessels actually enter, and the urinary pole where the filtrate exits to go into the uriniferous tubule.